Hey guys, tonight we're traveling back to medieval Europe. Not to a grand castle with glowing candles and luxurious feather beds, but to the place where most people actually slept. Small, smoky cottages, cold stone rooms, crowded inns, and dark wooden houses where getting a good night's rest was far more difficult than you might imagine. So dim the lights, get comfortable, maybe turn on a fan for soft background noise, and let's slowly drift into tonight's journey together. Modern people complain about sleep all the time. The mattress is too firm. The pillow feels wrong. The room is too hot. The neighbor is too loud. The blanket is uncomfortable. These problems feel serious at 2 a.m. when you are staring at the ceiling. But after tonight, you may develop a completely new appreciation for your bed, your blanket, and perhaps most importantly, your entire century. Imagine it is evening in the year 1400. The sun has disappeared beyond the fields, and darkness spreads quickly across the village. There are no street lights, no glowing windows from electric bulbs, no phone screens lighting up the room. Once the sun sets and the fire grows weak, darkness becomes complete. Not modern darkness with tiny artificial lights everywhere. Real darkness, thick darkness, the kind that swallows detail and makes familiar places feel strange. Before you even think about sleep, the first problem is simple. Your house is not designed for comfort. Most ordinary medieval people lived in homes built from timber, mud, straw, stone, or wattle and daub. These materials were practical and affordable, but comfort was not the priority. Survival was the house needed to stand, block some wind, and keep some rain out. Beyond that, expectations remained fairly modest. From a distance, a medieval cottage might look charming. Thatched roof, small wooden frame, smoke rising from the chimney, or at least something resembling a chimney. Modern tourists might call it cozy or picturesque, but living inside it felt very different. Cracks in walls let wind enter. Rain sometimes found its way inside. Roofs leaked, floors were often packed dirt or rough wood. Insulation barely existed by modern standards. Then there was space, or more accurately, the lack of space. Many peasant families lived in a single main room. One room for cooking, eating, working, and sleeping. Privacy, as modern people understand it, barely existed. There was no master bedroom, no children's room, no guest room. The whole family shared the same environment, day and night. If you wanted alone time, medieval life had unfortunate news for you. A typical household might include parents, multiple children, perhaps grandparents, and sometimes animals nearby as well. Yes, animals. Depending on region and season, livestock might shelter close to human living spaces to protect them from theft, cold, or predators. This meant your nighttime environment might include not only family members, but also chickens, goats, sheep, or other creatures making unpredictable noises at inconvenient hours. Now let us discuss the bed, because this is where many romantic ideas about the medieval world quietly collapse. If you imagine soft layered blankets, spring mattresses, and memory foam support, prepare for disappointment. Most ordinary people slept on simple wooden frames, benches, rough mattresses stuffed with straw, hay wool scraps, or directly on bedding laid across the floor. Straw was common because it was cheap and accessible. Straw mattresses sound harmless until you actually imagine sleeping on one every night. Straw shifts, straw compresses, straw pokes, straw eventually breaks down. Even with cloth layers covering it, comfort remained limited. You could find one reasonably soft position, but move slightly and something sharp suddenly reminded you that your bed was essentially dried plant material packed into fabric, not ideal for back support. Pillows were equally unimpressive. Wealthy households might own feather pillows. Ordinary people often used folded cloth, wool stuffing, or whatever soft materials were available. In many homes, luxury meant having enough bedding to stay warm, not achieving perfect neck alignment. The phrase orthopedic support would sound like sorcery to medieval peasants. But the bed itself was only the beginning. The real challenge came from what lived inside and around it. Fleas loved medieval bedding, absolutely loved it. Straw, cloth, warm bodies, and nearby animals created excellent conditions for parasites. Fleas could quickly turn bedtime into a miserable negotiation between exhaustion and itching. Just when your body finally relaxed after a long day of labor, a bite on your ankle reminded you that tiny creatures were enjoying their dinner. And fleas were not alone. Lice were common. Bedbugs existed. Mites existed. Insects in general had little respect for human sleep schedules. This means that while trying to rest, something might be crawling, biting, or moving nearby. Modern people occasionally panic after finding one insect in the bedroom. Medieval sleepers shared their nights with entire ecosystems. Then we reach another classic medieval sleep problem: smoke. Fire was essential. It provided heat, cooking, and light. The hearth sat at the center of household life, but smoke did not always exit efficiently. Many homes lacked proper chimneys, especially poorer ones. Smoke rose upward, but often lingered beneath the roof or spread throughout the room. Over time, people adapted, but adaptation did not make the air healthy. Imagine trying to fall asleep in a room that always smells of smoke, ash, burnt wood, damp wool, and humanity. Your eyes sting slightly. The air feels heavy. Your lungs breathe in soot night after night. During winter, when fires burned longer, smoke exposure increased. Sleep came, but often in an environment modern safety inspectors would strongly dislike. Winter itself deserves separate attention because medieval winters could be brutal. Once the fire weakened overnight, cold spread quickly. Blankets were rough wool, layered cloth, or whatever the household owned. If the family lacked enough bedding, body heat became crucial. Entire families slept close together partly because warmth meant survival. Shared warmth helped conserve heat during freezing nights. Even with blankets, cold often remained unavoidable. Your face might feel freezing, while the rest of your body stayed barely warm. Fingers stiffened, toes felt numb, breath felt cold in the air. Some mornings you woke feeling as though sleep had happened inside a refrigerator built from wood and mud. Romantic, snowy medieval scenes become much less charming when you remember there is no central heating. Summer, however, brought different suffering. The same cottage that trapped warmth in winter trapped heat in summer. Airflow was limited. The room became stuffy. Sweat collected. Insects multiplied. Flies buzzed. Mosquitoes attacked exposed skin. Bedding felt hot and damp. Add the smell of animals, smoke, old straw, and multiple people in one room, and the phrase sleeping conditions becomes generous. And then there was sound. Medieval nights were not silent. They were quieter than modern cities, in some ways, yes, but far from peaceful. Dogs barked at movement outside, chickens made random noises, cows shifted in stalls, wind rattled wood, rain hit thatch, babies cried, someone coughed repeatedly. Someone snored with enough force to frighten spirits. Sleep often came in interrupted cycles rather than uninterrupted peace. This matters because medieval sleep patterns were often different from modern ones. Historians suggest many people practiced segmented sleep, sometimes called first sleep and second sleep. Rather than sleeping straight through the night, people might sleep for several hours. Wake during the middle of the night, spend some time praying, talking, tending the fire, or doing small tasks, and then return to sleep. In a world without strict industrial schedules, sleep could follow natural rhythms differently. Of course, being awake in the middle of the night introduced another issue: darkness, real darkness. Once the fire burned low and candles were extinguished, night became profound. Outside the cottage stretched fields, woods, roads, and unknown things. Every sound felt bigger in darkness. Every creak felt suspicious. A branch scraping the wall might suddenly sound like something far more sinister. The human imagination becomes extremely creative in darkness, especially in deeply superstitious societies. And medieval Europe was full of beliefs about spirits, demons, witches, ghosts, omens, and supernatural dangers. Whether everyone believed every story hardly mattered. Night amplified fear. Strange sounds outside felt unsettling. Distant howls from animals became eerie. A shadow in candlelight could trigger immediate unease. Sleep becomes harder when your brain starts considering whether that strange sound outside belongs to wind or something less comforting. You might assume that sleeping badly was mostly a peasant problem. After all, peasants had straw beds, smoky cottages, and animals nearby. Surely nobles slept wonderfully in castles surrounded by luxury. Thick stone walls, servants, feather beds, warm fires, and fine blankets sound far better than mud floors and straw mattresses. Unfortunately, medieval wealth improved sleeping conditions only up to a point, because castles brought entirely new problems that comfort alone could not solve at all. Castles looked impressive from the outside, and that was the point. Massive stone walls, towers, gatehouses, and defensive structures announced power. But castles were built first for defense, not comfort. Thick stone walls blocked enemies effectively, but they also trapped cold with terrifying efficiency. Stone absorbs winter chill and holds it for long periods. During freezing months, castle interiors could feel like elegant refrigerators decorated with banners, tapestries, and expensive furniture that still could not fully defeat the cold. Even noble bedrooms often struggled against winter air. Yes, wealthy families had better blankets, furs, wool coverings, curtains around beds, and larger fireplaces, but warmth remained difficult to maintain. Fires burned down overnight. Drafts slipped through shutters, cracks, and stone joints. Servants might warm rooms before bedtime, yet by early morning cold returned. Imagine sleeping under expensive blankets while your nose still feels freezing because the entire room behaves like a stone cave. Beds themselves improved dramatically with wealth, but they were not perfect. Nobles often slept on wooden frames with rope supports, layered mattresses stuffed with wool, feathers, or softer materials, and heavy curtains surrounding the bed. These curtains were not just decoration, they trapped warmth and provided privacy in shared castle environments. A bed could almost function as a room within a room. That sounds luxurious until you remember what also enjoyed warm, enclosed spaces. Parasites? Yes, even wealthy people dealt with bedbugs, fleas, lice, and insects. Rich bedding created excellent hiding places. Servants cleaned and replaced materials more often than peasants could. But medieval sanitation remained limited across all classes. Wealth reduced discomfort, but did not eliminate biology. Somewhere in the Middle Ages, a noble probably lay awake in silk sheets, scratching flea bites, while wondering why life remained unfair despite owning 3 horses and a castle. Noise remained another universal problem. Castles were full of people. Servants moved constantly. Guards changed shifts. Horses stamped in stables. Doors opened and closed. Metal armor clinked. Fires crackled. Dogs barked. Messengers arrived late. Kitchens started early. Privacy existed more for the powerful, but silence remained rare. Even lords could be awakened by shouting in courtyards, sudden alarms, or drunken nobles returning from feasts with reduced volume control and increased confidence in their singing ability. Then there were the smells. Medieval castles were cleaner than many imagine, but they were far from modern standards. Without plumbing, waste management remained complicated. Chamber pots were common. Waste disposal systems varied. Kitchens produced strong smells. Stables added animal odors. Fires added smoke. Tallow candles added their own scent. Many people living inside stone walls created a mixture of smells that modern visitors would probably describe using less polite language than medieval chroniclers did in official records. Travelers faced even worse sleeping conditions. Medieval roads were long, muddy, dangerous, and exhausting. If you traveled between towns, monasteries, markets, or cities, sleep depended heavily on where you stopped. Inns existed, but quality varied wildly. Some provided reasonable food, shelter, and safety. Others offered beds so questionable that sleeping outside might feel competitive. And since you often had little choice after dark, the road decided your comfort more than personal preference ever could. A crowded-in sleeping room was an experience. Multiple travelers, often complete strangers, shared common spaces. Merchants, pilgrims, laborers, messengers, and mysterious men who avoided explaining their profession all slept under one roof. Snoring came from every direction. Someone coughed constantly. Someone talked in sleep. Someone smelled terrible after weeks on the road. Privacy vanished completely. If you value personal space, medieval inns would test both patience and sanity before midnight even arrived. And of course, sleeping near strangers introduced fear. Theft was common enough that many travelers slept with money tied beneath clothing or hidden close to the body. You might wake repeatedly just to check whether your pouch remained attached. Imagine trying to sleep deeply while wondering whether the stranger beside you is an honest merchant or someone planning to leave with your money before sunrise. Trust becomes difficult when your survival literally depends on what remains in your pockets tomorrow morning. By now, one thing becomes clear. Whether peasant, noble, or traveler, medieval sleep rarely meant perfect comfort. Different classes had different problems, but peaceful, uninterrupted rest remained surprisingly rare. Cold, heat, insects, noise, smells, fear, and discomfort followed almost everyone, and we still have not reached, perhaps, the worst sleep thief of all: illness, because nothing destroyed medieval sleep faster than pain, fever, or the terrifying uncertainty of getting sick during the night. Now let us talk about, perhaps, the cruelest enemy of medieval sleep: pain. In the modern world, if your tooth starts hurting at midnight, the situation is unpleasant. But you usually know help exists. Painkillers, dentists, medicine, emergency care. In medieval Europe, pain felt far more terrifying because relief was uncertain. The pain might fade tomorrow, or it might stay for weeks, or it might get worse until sleep becomes almost impossible. Tooth pain alone could turn nights into misery. Medieval diets often contained coarse bread with tiny stone fragments from grinding grain, which slowly damaged teeth over time. Sugar was less common for peasants, but decay still happened. Infection happened. Broken teeth happened. Once severe pain began, every heartbeat seemed to pound directly inside your jaw. Lying down often made the throbbing feel even stronger, turning bedtime into torture rather than rest. Medical treatments varied from useful herbal remedies to ideas that sound alarming today: clove-like herbs, alcohol, poultices, and heat might help slightly. Other treatments involved pulling the tooth, often without anything resembling proper anesthesia. Imagine trying to sleep while knowing tomorrow someone may remove your tooth using force, metal tools, and confidence. Suddenly staying awake with pain feels only slightly less frightening than the treatment itself. Pain from labor created another problem. Most medieval people worked physically demanding jobs from childhood: farming, chopping wood, carrying water, lifting grain sacks, plowing fields, hammering metal, weaving, hauling stone, and walking long distances left marks on the body. At night, muscles ached, backs burned, knees throbbed, hands stiffened. You might feel utterly exhausted, yet still struggle to find a comfortable position because every joint complained the moment you stopped moving. Injuries made things worse: a twisted ankle from uneven roads, a cut from tools, a burn from the hearth, or a strained shoulder from heavy labor could all disrupt sleep for days. Minor injuries modern people dismiss could become serious in medieval life. Infection was always a threat. Even a small wound could swell, redden, and become dangerously painful. Sleep becomes difficult when every movement reminds you something in your body is going wrong and may not heal safely. Then came sickness. Fever transformed night into something strange and exhausting. One moment you shivered beneath blankets, teeth chattering from cold. The next moment heat flooded your body, sweat-soaking bedding. Your mind drifted between dreams and half-conscious confusion. The room felt too hot, then too cold. Time blurred, sounds stretched. Sleep came in broken fragments. For many medieval families, nighttime illness meant helpless waiting beside someone burning with fever and praying morning would bring improvement. Children added another layer to nighttime life. Babies do not respect sleep schedules in any century. Medieval babies cried at night just as loudly as modern ones. Hungry infants woke mothers repeatedly. Sick children developed fevers at terrible hours. Nightmares sent children running toward parents. Bedwetting meant cold, wet bedding, needing attention. Large families in small spaces guaranteed that one person's disrupted sleep often became everyone's disrupted sleep. A single crying child could wake an entire household within seconds. Mothers especially carried enormous nighttime burdens. After full days of cooking, cleaning, carrying water, caring for animals, helping in fields, and managing children, many women still slept lightly because they remained alert to every small sound. A cough from a child, movement near the fire, strange noise outside, or baby crying could immediately pull them awake. Exhaustion did not guarantee deep sleep when responsibility trained your mind to remain half alert even during rest. Pregnancy made sleeping harder too. Imagine carrying a child while living in a world without modern pillows, supportive mattresses, prenatal care, or pain management. Back pain, swollen feet, discomfort, and fatigue combined with difficult sleeping conditions. Finding a comfortable position on straw bedding while your body changed daily must have been deeply frustrating, and beyond physical discomfort sat another weight: fear. Childbirth in medieval times carried serious danger for both mother and baby. Fear itself deserves attention because anxiety steals sleep in every century. Medieval people had many reasons to worry at night. Would harvest fail? Would winter food last? Would taxes rise? Would livestock survive? Would disease spread? Would war reach the village? Would raiders attack? Would the Lord demand more labor? Would tomorrow bring disaster? When survival feels uncertain, the body lies down, but the mind often keeps working, replaying worries in darkness again and again. Even religion influenced sleep. Medieval Christianity offered comfort, but it also carried deep concern about sin, judgment, demons, and salvation. Many genuinely feared dying unprepared. A strange pain in the night might trigger serious thoughts about mortality. Nightmares could feel spiritually meaningful. Sleep paralysis, vivid dreams, or hallucinations from fever might be interpreted as supernatural encounters. When belief and fear combine in darkness, restful sleep becomes much harder to maintain. Nightmares themselves were terrifying because medieval people often viewed dreams differently than we do today. Some dreams were seen as warnings, messages, temptations, or omens. A frightening dream could linger long after waking. If you dreamed of death, fire, demons, or disaster, the emotional impact remained strong. You might wake sweating, heart racing, staring into darkness while trying to decide whether the dream meant nothing, or something you desperately did not want to be true. By now, one truth becomes impossible to ignore. Medieval sleep was rarely simple rest. It was a constant negotiation with cold, pain, sickness, fear, and exhaustion. Yet strangely, we still have not reached one of the biggest reasons sleep became miserable. Because sometimes the problem was not inside the house at all. Sometimes the problem waited outside your door, hidden in darkness, making every sound feel dangerous. And that danger had many forms. Pain was one of the greatest enemies of sleep in medieval Europe, and unlike today, pain rarely came with reliable relief. If a tooth began throbbing in the middle of the night, there were no painkillers waiting in a cabinet, no emergency dentist to call, and no guarantee the suffering would end soon. All you had was time, prayer, crude remedies, and the uncomfortable knowledge that tomorrow might feel even worse than tonight. Tooth pain, in particular, could become unbearable because medieval diets slowly damaged teeth in ways many people never considered. Bread, the most common food, often contained tiny stone particles from grinding grain between millstones. Over years of chewing, those fragments wore teeth down. Cracks formed, decay followed, and infections sometimes reached deep into the jaw. Once the pain began, each heartbeat felt like a hammer striking inside your mouth. Lying down often made severe pain feel worse because blood pressure shifted and increased throbbing around inflamed areas. So even when your body begged for rest after a full day of exhausting labor, your jaw could keep you awake hour after hour. You might turn from one side to another, press cloth against your face, whisper prayers into darkness, and wait desperately for sleep that refused to come no matter how tired you felt. And tooth pain was only one type of suffering. The average medieval body carried constant physical stress because labor began early in life and rarely became easier with age. Farmers bent over fields for hours, woodcutters swung heavy axes, blacksmiths hammered metal repeatedly, women hauled water and firewood daily, and laborers carried burdens modern people would struggle to lift once. By night, the body remembered every task in painful detail. Back pain was probably so common that many people simply accepted it as part of life. Knees ached from bending and kneeling. Hands stiffened from repetitive work. Shoulders burned from lifting. Feet throbbed after miles of walking across rough roads or muddy fields. Exhaustion does not always create easy sleep. Sometimes extreme physical fatigue only makes discomfort more obvious because the moment movement stops, pain finally gets permission to speak loudly. Even minor injuries could ruin sleep for days. A twisted ankle from uneven ground, a cut from farming tools, a splinter buried in skin, a burn from the hearth, or a strained shoulder from lifting grain could all become major problems. Without modern medicine, small injuries were dangerous because infection constantly waited. Redness, swelling, heat, and growing pain often signaled that something worse had begun inside the wound. Fever transformed nighttime into something deeply miserable. 1 hour you shivered beneath blankets, teeth rattling from cold, unable to stop shaking. The next hour, heat flooded your body until sweat soaked your bedding. The room felt freezing, then boiling, then freezing again. Your mind drifted in strange half-dreams where time felt distorted. Sleep came only in broken fragments, interrupted by discomfort so intense it almost felt unreal. For families, sickness meant more than personal suffering because illness rarely affected just one person emotionally. If a child developed a high fever at night, parents often stayed awake watching every breath. They touched foreheads repeatedly, whispered prayers, prepared herbs, and hoped morning would bring improvement. The worst part was helplessness. You could care, comfort, and pray, but often you simply had to wait while fear slowly grew in the darkness. Children themselves were another major reason sleep remained fragmented. Babies cried through the night exactly as they do now, except medieval parents had far fewer comforts to calm them. No bottle warmer, no baby monitor, no soft nightlight, no modern medicine. Hungry infants woke mothers repeatedly. Toddlers had nightmares. Sick children coughed endlessly. In one-room homes, a single restless child could icily wake every sleeping person nearby within moments. Women, especially mothers, often experienced the lightest sleep because responsibility trained them to remain alert even during rest. After full days spent cooking, cleaning, sewing, carrying water, Caring for children, feeding animals, and helping with labor, many still slept with one ear open. A cough, unusual silence, movement near the fire, or sound from outside could instantly wake them. Exhaustion did not remove responsibility. It merely made carrying it harder. And then there was fear, the quiet thief of sleep that needs no physical pain to work. Medieval people had countless reasons to worry once darkness fell. Would tomorrow's weather destroy crops? Would stored grain last until spring? Would livestock survive winter? Would taxes increase? Would war spread nearby? Would disease enter the village? The body might lie down under blankets, but the mind could continue working long after the eyes closed. But pain, sickness, and discomfort were not always the only things keeping medieval people awake. Sometimes the greatest enemy of sleep was simply fear. Real fear. The kind that grows stronger after sunset when the world becomes silent and every strange sound feels dangerous. Night had a completely different meaning in the Middle Ages. Once darkness fell, the familiar world changed into something uncertain and deeply unsettling. Today, even at midnight, we live surrounded by artificial light. Street lights glow outside, cars pass by, phone screens illuminate rooms, cities hum quietly in the background. Medieval people had none of this. When the fire burned low and candles were extinguished, darkness became absolute. The kind of darkness where your hand could disappear inches from your face, and even familiar rooms suddenly felt strange. That darkness made every sound feel bigger. Wind pushing against wooden walls could sound like footsteps. Rain tapping a roof could feel like someone moving outside. A branch scratching against a wall might suddenly sound like fingernails dragging through wood. The human brain has always been good at turning uncertainty into fear, and without light to confirm safety, imagination often filled the gaps with terrifying possibilities. For villagers living near forests, nighttime sounds were especially unsettling. Wolves still existed across much of Europe. Foxes screamed in eerie ways that could sound almost human. Owls called from trees. Dogs barked at movement no one else could see. Horses in nearby stables suddenly shifted in panic. Even if nothing dangerous was actually happening, the sound alone could pull you from sleep and flood your body with adrenaline in seconds. Then came superstition, which shaped medieval nights in powerful ways. Europe in the Middle Ages was deeply religious, but also deeply superstitious. People believed in demons, curses, evil spirits, witches, restless ghosts, omens, and supernatural dangers lurking in darkness. Night was often seen as spiritually dangerous because darkness symbolized uncertainty, temptation, and forces beyond human control. Even educated people could carry such fears. If a strange sound came from outside, you might not simply think animal. You might think something worse. Perhaps a spirit. Perhaps a demon. Perhaps witchcraft. Perhaps a warning. Whether these beliefs were true mattered less than the fact that people genuinely felt fear because of them. And fear destroys sleep efficiently. Once your heart starts racing, even the safest bed feels far less comfortable than it did moments earlier. Nightmares could feel terrifying for the same reason. Modern people usually dismiss bad dreams as dreams. Medieval people often interpreted dreams more seriously. A dream involving fire, death, blood, falling, demons, or disasters might be seen as a warning or omen. Waking from such dreams did not always bring immediate comfort. Instead, fear could linger for hours while you lay awake, wondering whether the dream meant something terrible about tomorrow. Sleep paralysis likely frightened many people as well, though they had no scientific explanation for it. Imagine waking, unable to move, feeling pressure on your chest, unable to speak, perhaps seeing shadowy shapes in the darkness. Today, we recognize this as a neurological event. In medieval Europe, such experiences could easily be interpreted as demonic attacks, spirits, or supernatural oppression. That kind of experience could haunt someone for years and turn bedtime into dread. Storms created another layer of nighttime terror. A storm in the modern world is inconvenient. A storm in the medieval world could feel like a direct threat to survival. Thunder shook walls. Lightning lit entire rooms for seconds. Strong wind rattled roofs and doors violently. Rain leaked through weak roofing. Every crash outside raised questions. Would the roof hold? Would flooding begin? Would crops survive tomorrow? Nature had enormous power over medieval lives. For peasants especially, storms carried financial fear along with physical fear. Heavy rain at the wrong time could destroy crops. Hail could ruin months of labor in minutes. Strong wind could damage buildings. A storm during harvest season might mean real hunger later. So even while lying in bed, listening to thunder, your mind could race far beyond tonight. You were not just hearing weather, you were hearing uncertainty about next month's food supply. Fire, strangely, was both comfort and danger. The hearth provided warmth, light, and security. Yet, it also carried constant risk. A spark landing on dry straw or cloth could start disaster quickly. Thatched roofs burned easily. Entire villages had been destroyed by fire spreading from a single home. Imagine trying to sleep while knowing the same flame, keeping your family warm, could also kill everyone if something went wrong during the night. This created a difficult balance. Let the fire burn too low, and the house became freezing by morning. Keep it too active, and risk increased. Someone often checked the hearth before sleep carefully. Even then, worry remained. If you smelled stronger smoke at night or noticed unusual heat, panic could arrive instantly. Few things wake humans faster than realizing fire might be spreading while everyone sleeps nearby in darkness. And then there were human dangers. Bandits, raiders, thieves, drunk troublemakers, or soldiers moving through regions could all make nights stressful. Most villages were small and vulnerable. Locked doors offered limited security. If violence happened nearby, everyone knew how little protection ordinary homes truly offered. One shout outside could wake an entire village. Dogs barking repeatedly at night rarely helped anyone feel calm enough to return to deep sleep quickly. War made sleep even worse. Medieval Europe saw constant local conflicts, raids, feuds, and political violence. Even if armies never reached your exact village, rumors traveled. Stories of looting, burning, or soldiers stealing livestock created real fear. Parents worried constantly about protecting children and food supplies. You might lie down physically exhausted, yet mentally alert, listening for sounds that might signal danger approaching from the road or nearby woods. By now, one truth becomes painfully obvious. Medieval sleep was not simply about lying down and resting until morning. It was a nightly battle against cold, pain, fear, insects, noise, smoke, sickness, and uncertainty. Even when the body collapsed from exhaustion, true restful sleep remained difficult. And perhaps the strangest part of all is this: despite how miserable it sounds, medieval people still adapted, because they had no alternative. Humans can adapt to astonishing hardship. What feels unbearable to us often became normal to them. They learned to sleep through noise, endure discomfort, tolerate cold, and function despite interrupted rest. But adaptation does not mean comfort. It only means survival. The body keeps going because life demands it. And that may be the most important truth about sleep in the Middle Ages. People rested not because conditions were good, but because exhaustion eventually won. There is one more uncomfortable truth about medieval sleep that modern people rarely consider. Night did not always mean uninterrupted rest from evening until sunrise. In fact, many historians believe a large number of medieval people followed something very different from our modern sleeping pattern. Instead of one long continuous sleep, many experienced what is now called segmented sleep, divided into two separate sleeping periods. The first sleep usually began a few hours after sunset. After a long day of physical labor, exhaustion made falling asleep relatively easy despite discomfort. People slept deeply for several hours while the fire slowly weakened and darkness settled completely around the home. But then something interesting often happened. Many woke naturally in the middle of the night without panic or frustration. To them, this waking period could feel completely normal. This middle period between first and second sleep could last anywhere from minutes to several hours, depending on the person, season, and circumstances. During this time, some prayed quietly, some added wood to the fire, some spoke softly with family or spouses, some reflected on dreams, some completed small tasks impossible during daylight. Others simply sat in silence, half awake, letting the body rest before sleep returned again. Modern people often panic when waking at 2 or 3 a.m., immediately assuming something is wrong. But for many medieval sleepers, nighttime waking may have been expected. Their world followed natural light more closely than ours. Without electric lighting, pushing bedtime later and later, people often slept earlier. This naturally changed how the body distributed rest across long winter nights, especially when darkness lasted for many hours. Winter nights in particular were incredibly long. In Northern Europe, darkness could stretch across huge portions of the day. If the sun disappeared early and people slept soon after, a single uninterrupted sleep until sunrise became less natural for some bodies. Waking in the middle of the night was not necessarily insomnia. It could simply be part of how human sleep worked before modern schedules reshaped daily life around clocks and artificial light. Even during these quiet waking hours, however, discomfort remained. If the fire had nearly died, cold quickly became noticeable. Blankets felt less warm. The room air felt sharp and freezing against exposed skin. You might wake not because your body was done sleeping, but because cold slowly pulled you out of deep rest. The first thought might not be philosophical reflection. It might simply be, I am freezing and need warmth immediately. Adding fuel to the fire in darkness was its own challenge. Move too carelessly and you might wake others. Fail to restart the flame properly and warmth would not return. Make too much noise and babies or children might wake. Even something as simple as maintaining heat through the night required effort. Modern thermostats quietly solved problems medieval families had to manage manually, often while half asleep and shivering in darkness. For wealthy households, servants sometimes helped manage nighttime comfort. Fires could be maintained more easily. Additional blankets existed, bed curtains trapped warmth better. But even nobles dealt with interrupted sleep. Castles remained cold. Stone held chill. Drafts moved through corridors. Guards changed shifts. Bells rang. Messengers arrived unexpectedly. Riches improved conditions, but did not magically create silent, warm, uninterrupted nights like many imagine. Travelers suffered perhaps the most unpredictable sleep of all. Sleeping in unfamiliar places always makes rest harder, and medieval travel amplified every problem. Strange inns, crowded shared rooms, unknown companions, new sounds, and constant concern about theft kept many sleeping lightly. Even if your body desperately needed rest after walking all day, your brain remained cautious because deep sleep beside strangers could be genuinely dangerous. Pilgrims, merchants, and messengers often became skilled at sleeping in imperfect conditions because they had no choice. Hard floors, shared benches, straw bedding, barns, wagons, monasteries, roadside shelters, and crowded inns all became temporary bedrooms. Comfort became relative. Eventually, a dry floor and roof overhead could feel luxurious simply because they were safer than sleeping outside, exposed to weather, animals, and thieves. And outside was often worst of all. Sleeping outdoors in medieval Europe meant accepting constant vulnerability. Cold air stole warmth quickly. Rain could begin suddenly. Ground remained hard and uneven. Insects became relentless. Wild animals might wander near camps. Every small sound triggered alertness. Even if danger never came, the possibility alone kept the nervous system active. The body rested, but rarely fully relaxed. This brings us to, perhaps, the biggest irony of medieval sleep. People were more physically exhausted than most modern humans, yet often slept under far worse conditions. Today, many people struggle to sleep despite comfort because stress keeps the mind active. Medieval people faced both physical exhaustion and external hardship. Their bodies demanded rest desperately, but the environment constantly fought against truly restorative sleep. And still, every morning arrived the same way. The rooster crowed, light returned, work resumed. Whether sleep had been good or terrible changed little about responsibilities. Fields still needed tending. Animals still needed feeding. Water still needed carrying. Bread still needed making. Children still needed care. Life moved forward without asking whether you felt rested. Fatigue did not cancel labor. It simply became part of daily existence. Perhaps that is what feels most shocking to modern people. There were no sick days for poor sleep, no sleeping in until noon, because the mattress felt uncomfortable. No weekend recovery after difficult nights. Bad sleep did not pause survival. If anything, poor sleep often made physically demanding days even harder, which then led to more pain, more exhaustion, and another difficult night. It became a repeating cycle with little escape. By now, the picture is clear. Medieval sleep was not romantic candlelight and peaceful dreams inside cozy cottages. For most people, it meant straw bedding, smoke-filled rooms, cold air, parasites, noise, fear, pain, interrupted rest, and constant uncertainty. Sleep still came because the human body always demands it eventually, but restful sleep, the kind that leaves you refreshed was probably far rarer than we imagine. And yet, despite everything, people endured. They slept badly, woke tired, worked hard, and somehow continued building families, villages, communities, and civilizations. Human resilience is extraordinary. Perhaps that is the final lesson hidden inside medieval nights. Comfort may be modern, but endurance is ancient. Long before soft mattresses and electric heaters, people survived exhausting nights and still found strength to greet the morning again. So after everything we have explored tonight, one final question remains. Was sleeping in medieval times truly miserable? For most ordinary people, the answer is almost certainly yes. Not because they never slept, and not because every night was terrible, but because good sleep depended on countless factors rarely under their control. Warmth, safety, health, weather, food, and peace all had to align, and often they simply did not. The modern bedroom is something medieval people would likely view as miraculous. A soft mattress designed for spinal support, clean sheets washed regularly, temperature control with heating or air conditioning, electric lights available instantly, windows that block wind and rain, medicine for pain, pest control, privacy, silence. Even simple things like pillows, blankets, and clean flooring represent centuries of gradual improvement in human comfort that we often barely notice anymore. Imagine bringing a medieval peasant into your bedroom tonight. Before even reaching the bed, they might be amazed by the floor, the walls, the glass windows, and the stable indoor temperature. Then they see the mattress. Soft, thick, level, clean, dry, warm. No straw poking through fabric. No fleas hiding in bedding. No smoke hanging in the air. No animals nearby. To them, your ordinary bed might feel less like furniture and more like luxury reserved for kings. Yet perhaps the most important difference is not physical comfort, it is psychological safety. Most modern people go to bed expecting the house to still be standing by morning. We assume no wolves will appear outside. We assume a storm will not destroy our food supply. We assume a strange fever can be treated. We assume fire alarms, locks, medicine, and emergency services exist if something goes wrong. Medieval people rarely had such certainty. That constant uncertainty shaped sleep more than any straw mattress ever could. True rest requires safety. The body sleeps most deeply when it believes danger is low. But in medieval life, danger rarely felt far away. Hunger, disease, injury, violence, weather, and loss were always possible. Even if disaster never came, the possibility itself changed how people rested. Their bodies slept, but often within a world that never felt fully secure. And still, despite all this hardship, people adapted in extraordinary ways. They laughed with family around fires. They told stories before bed. They prayed together. They comforted sick children. They shared warmth in winter. They built routines around difficult conditions. Human beings are remarkably skilled at finding normal even inside hardship. What sounds unbearable to us was simply life to them, because they knew no other version of the world. This is what makes history so fascinating. The past feels foreign in details, but familiar in emotion. Medieval parents still worried about children. Couples still whispered in darkness before sleep. Sick people still feared pain. Tired workers still longed for rest. Children still had nightmares. People still dreamed, hoped, feared, loved, and endured. The mattress changed. The century changed. Human emotion did not change nearly as much as we imagine. Perhaps that is the strangest realization of all. Somewhere in the year 1400, in a tiny smoky cottage beneath a leaking roof, a peasant lay awake at night, feeling exhausted, uncomfortable, worried, and desperate for sleep. And centuries later, someone lies awake in a modern bed, staring at a ceiling, unable to sleep because of stress, worry, or racing thoughts. The causes differ, but the human experience still feels strangely recognizable. Of course, if given the choice, most of us would not trade places. Romantic fantasies about medieval life often disappear the moment real daily discomfort enters the picture. Castles sound wonderful until you feel the cold stone. Cottages seem charming until smoke fills your lungs. Candlelight feels beautiful until darkness hides everything beyond it. The Middle Ages produced incredible art, architecture, and history, but comfort was not among its greatest achievements. So yes, sleeping in medieval times was exhausting. Cold winters, hot summers, insects, parasites, pain, sickness, smoke, noise, fear, and physical exhaustion shaped nearly every night. For many, sleep was not luxurious recovery, but simple survival. Rest happened because the body demanded it, not because conditions encouraged it. And every sunrise often arrived before true recovery had fully happened. But maybe there is also something worth admiring here. Despite poor sleep, despite endless labor, despite uncertainty and hardship, millions of ordinary people kept going. They planted fields, raised children, built villages, preserved traditions, and carried civilization forward. They did all of that while sleeping under conditions most modern people would consider unbearable. That level of endurance deserves respect. And so, as our journey through the medieval night comes to an end, the village slowly grows quiet once more. The fire burns low inside the cottage. Smoke drifts gently upward through dark wooden beams. Outside, the wind moves softly across fields beneath pale moonlight. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barks once, then silence returns. The world feels still, ancient, and deeply tired. Inside, a family lies close together beneath rough wool blankets. Straw shifts softly beneath tired bodies. The day's labor has finally ended. Tomorrow will bring the same work, the same responsibilities, the same struggles, but not yet. For now, even in discomfort, even in cold, even with all the hardships of medieval life, night offers one precious gift: rest. Not perfect rest, not comfortable rest, but rest nonetheless. And perhaps that is enough. So the next time you crawl into your warm bed, adjust your pillow and pull a soft blanket over your shoulders. Remember the millions who came before you. Remember the smoky cottages, the straw mattresses, the freezing stone walls, and the long dark nights of medieval Europe. Then appreciate something beautifully simple. You are incredibly lucky to sleep in this century. Good night and sleep well.